Here at Be Freaking Awesome, we believe that life is too short to be anything less than extraordinary. Join us as we explore what it means to live authentically, grow continuously, and have a blast while doing it. Let's get started. Hello, BFA fam. Welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Sami Kinnison, here with Angela Belford. And today we are going to be talking about friendship. And I know some of you longtime listeners might be saying, Sami, don't you guys talk about friendship like kind of a lot? And you're right, we do. We actually try to bring it up at least once a year, if not more than that. There's a lot of different reasons behind it. There is the longest study on relationships from Harvard. And one of the big key findings is that relationships is the key to happiness, and how you relate to others is so vitally important. Yes, Angela?
It's the longevity. It's the study on people who've lived longer, and the relationships is the key. You said it was a study on relationships. It wasn't actually. It was originally a study it was the first study on positive outcomes, and it started 80 years ago. Yeah, we have talked about it a lot. But anyway, relationships is the number one thing key to long-term happiness.
And yet it's also something that is like a lot and hard and not always just like really easy. And I think that, Angela, I know you've had some experiences and some observations coming up from different folks you've chatted with and coached, and some books you might be writing that has to do a little bit with this. You want to break that down for us?
Yeah. So book 3 is in final edit process. Well, my final revision process. That is a fictional version of Traveling Light. We'll probably have an episode where I just talk about that. But then I've known for a couple of years I was going to do book 4 on what I thought was abandonment issues, which means it's attachment issues, which is related to the belief that we talk about in Traveling Light, and kind of everything is I belong. And what I have observed is, number one, I just want to stop for a second and say, like, it is so cool because I wrote Traveling Light when I knew everyone said, are you sure you don't want to wait until you know a lot more? And I'm like, no, I want to write it while I'm still fresh, because I remember how hard it is to read somebody else that's done something for a long time, and it's what it feels like to be fresh and new. I think already I'm at the place where I forget how hard it is that first time you're getting in your body and feeling the feels, right? And to see like how much my understanding of this concept has like blossomed in the last 3 years is so fun and cool for me. And even to be able to look back on what I wrote then and flesh it out even more, because I just really didn't connect it. I wasn't connecting. I was talking all around these things. And so for starters, let's talk about abandonment issues can be because your parents get divorced, your parents move because their job changes, and so you lose your friends. You could have a death of a family member. You could personally go through divorce. Like, there's a lot of things. I think experiencing abandonment is actually a universal thing because everybody dies, so you're going to lose someone at some point, right? And it's our ability to repair after that, and to really understand that abandonment. And so what I see a lot in my coaching practice, in my own life, is that when we struggle with the belief I don't belong, when we don't have a solid understanding that I do belong, then what happens is that we are more susceptible to a fear of rejection. And when we are more susceptible to a fear of rejection, then asking someone to be my friend is exponentially harder. Also, when we have that fear of rejection, we also probably have a pretty loud and active inner critic. So that then when we're rejected, not only are we rejected from that person, but then we reject ourselves by beating ourselves up and like creating this really like double whammy. So that makes the ask of, will you be my friend, so much harder. And I know people don't actually say, will you be my friend? But whether you ask somebody out on a date or a coffee date, like, that's a potential for rejection. Well, then when you get rejected or you're even afraid to be rejected, then you become more lonely. The more lonely you are, then the more you confirm the belief, and your brain is offered all this extra evidence. See, you don't belong, you don't belong, you don't belong. And it's just not true. But we are, when that is how we see the world, when that is the glasses that we see the world, that I don't really belong, then it's just this self perpetuating, terribly difficult cycle to get out of.
And I think that even in the things you made the comment, we don't necessarily ask, will you be my friend? It's not quite like first grade on the playground where, hey, will you be my friend? That's it. There you go. You're now lifelong friends. There are, you send a text message and maybe it goes unanswered for 2 days. The story in your head about why that went unanswered for 2 days can be very much impacted by the beliefs. And if you have the belief, I don't belong, this person doesn't like me, I'm not a priority to them, I they I said something wrong, I offended them, all of the reasons why that you're the reason why they didn't text back. And maybe they just got in the hospital, or they had a family member who just went to the hospital and they're not texting anybody back. Maybe they're somebody with ADHD and they thought they texted you back in their head and they didn't, because that's me like a lot. And there's so many other reasons that have nothing to do. And when you doubt, do I belong? Do I fit in? Am I when you have some of those negative beliefs, you probably have some negative assumptions about interactions that you have. Whereas a more positive assumption could be like, yeah, I'm a mom and I'm texting somebody else who also has, 2 to 4 kids, and she's busy and she'll respond to it at the time that she does. And what a
Can
delight that we get to have a conversation.
I tell you an actual real story that happened to me?
Hmm.
And I was at church. I would have been pregnant, and had a 2-year old, and I was in a small group, the 6 couples, whatever, and I ran into one of them upstairs. I don't remember what I said to them. They went downstairs and saw another one of the people in our group and were like, "Oh my gosh, I think Angela's mad at me, and I don't know what I did." And the other person was like, "Why do you think that?" "Well, I just tried to talk to her and she was really short." And the other person from our group goes, "Do you know that her grandma died a week ago? And this is her first time back to church since her grandma died?" And the other lady was like, "Oh, I had no idea." The second friend was like, I don't think it has anything to do with you." Like, literally 0. And then she came into,
Literally.
I only know this story because she came back upstairs to say, "Oh my goodness, are you okay? I'm so sorry, and please forgive me. I made this just assumption. I made it about me, and I needed to be there for my friend. I needed to notice that my friend was hurting and not make
Mm,
it about me, but to go, is everything okay?" But
yeah.
she was scared. We didn't have a strong enough friendship. But
Hmm.
we had enough of a friendship that she did wanna confirm with another friend, you know what I mean? Which is, it was beautiful. I mean, it was a beautiful story, and it has stuck with me for literally 28 years, and I think that's common.
I think it is common. And I think that when we make it about ourselves, it is not because we are trying to be a villain, or when somebody else makes something about themselves, it is because we're human. It is because
We
we are
are.
all trying the gosh darned bestest that we can. And sometimes we miss. And repair, I think, is a huge part of friendship, and being unwilling to face that, what might feel awkward or might feel tricky, does keep us from building bigger friendships. And I think that that is something that's really important, is figuring out, like, how do you say, I had this assumption and I think it's wrong.
Well, before we get into that, I wanna introduce an idea that was new to me a few years ago when I went to, marriage therapy for the first time. And it may not be new to you if you studied emotionally focused therapy, if you studied, Creative for Connection, some of those books, but it was new to me. And when we start talking about abandonment issues and attachment, and actually I think we did talk about this in like episode 23, which also continues to be in our top 10 episodes because it talks about abandonment issues and attachment. But when we ask somebody for something, this sort of relates to last week's episode a little bit, but when we ask somebody, we are making a bid for attachment. That is kind of the clinical term that they use, and it is like it's almost like a poker kind of thing. I'm going to make a bid. Would you like to attach with me? Would you like to have lunch? Would you like to have dinner? Would you like to whatever? And um and how people respond, we either securely attach
Mhm.
or we don't, and that's when we get into repair. I had a situation where I texted somebody and said, "Hey, I'm back in town. What's your weekend look like?" I don't know, house projects. I made a bid for attachment. I didn't feel like they reciprocated. I was as much as I was willing to risk. That was as many poker chips. In Be Freaking Awesome, I talk about the poker chip theory of self esteem. And like some of us, if we only have 10 poker chips, if our belonging cup is very full or very, empty,
Limited.
then we don't have a lot of poker chips. So it feels really big and really scary. And not that I feel that way, but it was just like, I only have a limited amount of weekend time. And if it doesn't sound exciting to you to get together, then cool, no problem. Like, I wasn't mad at
And
her.
if I could offer, if you were wanting to get together, a potentially more clear text could have been, "Are you free this weekend to get together?" Not, "I'm back in town. What is your weekend look like?" Uh, if you
I know, but
wanted.
as someone who knows that they have a very busy schedule, I was actually trying to make it a lot less, yeah, I have been that way, and with somebody else that
Mhm.
has a very different and work life skill. There's an element where I was attempting to not make it too much pressure because someone else I texted them and said, "Hey, do you have dinner plans tonight or would you rather go to a play tomorrow?" And she's like, "Both, either, whichever one is happy for you." And I'm like, "Great, we'll go to dinner and the play tomorrow." And so I think I was attempting to your point of like, oh, are you texting somebody that has children and other responsibilities and all of that sort of thing? You're right. I could have been more clear and um
And that's
uh,
okay. And like
right.
that's the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
where the relationship is. And so
Yeah.
I think that one thing that's really, I think, an important piece of this whole factor is that in order to make friends, you do have to be willing to put some poker chips somewhere on the line. And if you continue to sit back and continue to wait for somebody else to make the step towards you first, you might find yourself waiting a long time. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. There's definitely extroverts adopt introverts all the time and say like, "This is now you're my person. Get over it." Um,
Well, I think that's why our episode we talked about making friends, we did so many options that related to like being in proximity with other people, like going to
right.
volunteer somewhere, joining a gym, going the same time, doing a kind of activity because then you don't have to risk so many poker chips.
Right. And connecting back to like abandonment and that struggle, my personal situation right now. So when I was right after Peter was born, so almost 4 years ago this summer, um I remember having a moment where I was like, I don't have a lot of close friends that are physically close. All of my close
Mm.
friends are geographically far. I have a lot of long distance friendships. The people who know something's wrong from just a few words are all on a phone call and nobody can just like, "Hey, I'll be over in just a second." And so I knew I needed. I was like, I need some close friends. I There were two
This
people, two
emotionally and geographically.
geographically and emotionally. And so there were 2 women in my life at that time that I was like, "I'm going to, like, invest, and I'm gonna go drop marbles in the relationship jar, and I know that you don't get a close friendship overnight, and so we are gonna, like, slowly but surely, like, try to build these friendships." And then they both got built, and it was beautiful, and it was lovely, and it was great season of my life where I'm like, "Wow," I one of them in particular, like, my next door neighbor, our kids are similar ages. The number of times that, like, at least 3 or 4 different times while both of our husbands were traveling for work, we sat in, like, a camp chair in our front lawn on, like, roughly the property line. So we're like, I'm still on the property with my children while they are inside, um, drinking a beer after the kids had gone to bed because it had been that long of a day. And we're just like, I just need a moment. And I just need somebody else to see me in this. And I can't leave because I got these kiddos. And I also, like, it's not the end of the world, but also it's just like a lot. And like, so rich and easy and beautiful. And she moved. And actually, the day that Diana moved was the same day as Maxine's, like, adoption party. And so there's this element where it's like we, like, had this big life change, and then this rock in my life moves to Colorado, and not just, like, moves down the road, but I'm like, oh, another close, far friend," which is not to say that I don't still, like, love our friendship, but I was like, I have still been dealing with the grief of that, and it will come up, and it's on the snow day where I'm like, I just wish I had my friend that I could just walk next door to and be like, "Can you believe these dang children are being ridiculous? Alright, now let's go back to, like, doing what we need to do." And there's grief in friendship, and yet I will still come back to the quote, "I do believe it is better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all," and to know the deep richness of friendship and of that kind of camaraderie, even though you're right, everybody leaves in the end, that can be a fact, not a condemnation, and I don't know, and so there's just some it's okay to accept that kind of risk in our life, and it's scary, but it's beautiful.
I think it's because we don't talk about that kind of risk that we run into the loneliness that we are facing. Because what I'm beginning to notice is the older we get, the more loss we've experienced. Um,
Mhm.
duh, makes
Duh.
sense, right? Duh. But if you also think about, like, if you had the Diana of your life, so you already lost all your college friends that you were close with in close
Oh.
proximity, and then your next door neighbor, and then think about that happening like 3 more times by the time you're 50. If we're not consciously aware of that, we can get to a point where we're like, "What is the point? I'm
Mhm.
just gonna suffer pain and loss." Which I love your what you're saying, like, even in spite of that, we still are going to love anyway, right?
Mhm.
Because the alternative is worse. The alternative of not re-engaging and not building the next friendship is way worse than and the loneliness that that would cause.
And I still
That
think it's a brave act
it
to
is a brave
love and
act.
to make bids for attachment and to attempt to make friends. Like, I still think that that is deeply brave. This morning, I was holding Henry and I was explaining to him that being brave does not mean that we aren't afraid. It means that even when we're afraid, we take a step anyway. And that's a lot. And it's not always cozy and fun. And yet, the benefits far outweigh the cons, in my opinion. I think that when you do a pro con list, if you want to get really analytical about it, what you stand to gain is significantly greater than what you stand to lose. I fully believe that. And I am curious, debate me. I want out, like, I don't know, is it? Is it real?
It is real, and it's funny that you say that because I was recently had a conversation. I seem to have several friends that are single, that are either on the apps, thinking about the apps, have been on the apps, dated somebody, whatever. I've like more than one hand worth. So if you're hearing this, friend, it's probably not you. But several of them said, "Oh, I assumed after what I said as soon as my divorce was final, what I said after my spouse passed, I wasn't going. I don't think I'll ever do that again. I don't think I'll ever date." And then now they're exploring it, and they're like, "Wonder what that is. Wonder about that." Because I think it is brave, and I think we do have to, but, uh, it is brave, and also, if it's not if you decide not to couple off with somebody and you decide to be single, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not at all trying to say that. I do think if we decide to not have friends, that is going to be, there's literal studies that say that is detrimental to your health. Not having a relationship, not having friendships, not having close relationships, 100% is detrimental to your health. It does not have to be a romantic relationship if you don't want it to be. So we do need love and belonging from our friends. There's science. It's not made up.
True, real science on
Real
that.
science.
So, how do we go about making friends or maintaining friends? Or, I don't know, what advice do we have? We've talked a lot about why it's important.
Well, I think for me, there's so much of it is just this awareness piece. It's like, um, I think if we talk about, the how, of course, in our previous episode, we talked a lot about some of the practical, but I really want to talk about like, besides like bumping into people, there are a couple of skill sets that I think that we need to cultivate as being a good listener. And one of them is curiosity. And
Mhm.
curiosity, what's beautiful is that it will make you a better friend. It will make you a better friend with yourself. It also is good for like if you are building a business, being
Mhm.
curious is a skill set that is I cannot emphasize enough how important curiosity is. Because when we are curious, then I heard someone say recently, they were like, I don't care who it is, I don't care how boring they are. I promise there's something about them that I can be curious about. And which I love. And so I think that if we cultivate our curiosity muscle, and then that is an important skill set. And combine that with the second skill set that I think is really critical to being a good friend, and that is being a good listener. I think when we can be a good listener, then that helps us because then we can hear things that make us curious.
Mm, I think that's really good. I um I got distracted for a second. My ADHD brain. You said curiosity is such an important skill to hone, and my brain only could hear curiosity killed the cat. And but then there is a really funny cartoon that I once saw that was Curiosity Killed the Cat, and it was like a little kid. He goes, "What cat? What kind of cat was it? How many lives did it have? How did it die? Where did it was? Where is it at? What color was the cat?" And like just kept asking questions. And I think about that a lot. And to be like, maybe it did, but we're gonna ask a lot of questions about why and how and what goes on and all those things. And it's gonna be a richer experience. It's gonna be, I don't know. I don't know how that connects in and whether I should
I
actually
love
keep
it
it
though,
in.
because then I was sitting here thinking about what would keep somebody from being curious. There are times where I'm careful about a question because I don't want to toss back at me. If I'm in a
Mhm.
space where I'm like feeling kind of like small and vulnerable, and I'm like, ooh, it's hard for me to be curious in that set because I'm like, you know, I asked somebody this week, what projects are keeping you excited? And they went into a list of home projects that they used to do, but they don't do home projects anymore. And I was like, oh, well, I mean, it doesn't have to be home. Like, just what are you working on that,
I
or
think
what's
you and I,
interesting?
though, are somewhat notorious for asking questions that are different than how people ask questions that sometimes make people confused. And
Yes.
so, like, what projects are you excited about? And they immediately assume home, not work. Or how do you spend your days?
Oh
And
my
people
gosh,
are
that
like,
trips people up.
the
They do not know it.
people who spend their days not at a 8 to 5 job are so grateful that you, like, asked a question that's like, "Wow, thanks for seeing me and my experience." That's not exactly the same for everybody else, but when you ask, "So what do you do for work?" And they're like, "Well, I'm a stay-at-home mom, I'm a caretaker," and it, like, feels like this I have to qualify or defend it, whereas, "How do you spend your days?" to me is such a more open question, and yes, everybody is like, what are you asking? Like, I don't understand.
I
But
know it's so weird because people will be like, I work. That's what most people have to do to pay for that. And I'm like, cool. What do you do for work? Like,
I was like, I don't get that every single time. I think I probably have like 1 out of 20 people who get grumpy about it. I probably have 10 people who are confused.
Yeah,
but then
you're
are
right.
like, "Oh, that's a cool answer. Like, I like the purpose behind that." And I was like, "I don't want to assume that you work maybe or that you work outside of your home because that's a work outside of the home." I was like, "Maybe you I have something else or maybe you have a passion project that you're more excited to talk about
Well,
than
and
the
there's
thing
so
that's
many
paying your
caregivers in
bills."
the world, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Tell me
there's
about all of those things because everybody has unique spark within them and I don't know,
mm.
ask those questions. So, being curious, listening well. Ironic that I wasn't listening well when you were talking about listening well.
No, I
Um,
was kind of hoping to softball it over to you so you could talk more about listening since you're the communication coach. I had a situation this week where I literally looked at somebody and I go, "Huh, I was not listening to respond. I was just absorbing. So hold on. I need a minute to figure out what my next thought is." It was the coolest thing. And it so caught me off guard that I didn't know what to say next.
yeah.
Yeah.
I One of the things on listening to other people that I think we can work a muscle up towards is when you can remember details about somebody that they have shared with you. It is so touching to that person. Be like, "Oh my gosh, you remembered that my grandma was in the hospital. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, you remembered that, this is the anniversary of my significant other passing." You retained these details. That is meaningful to me. I appreciate that. And it adds more marbles to the relationship jar than you realize to remember somebody's name. Somebody's name is the most precious sound that they could hear in the planet, per Dale Carnegie. And we so often just have a throwaway, I'm bad with names, so I don't remember them.
Can we talk about that? Because your brain wants to be right. And so the
Mhm.
more you say I'm bad with names, then the more you are bad with names. And
Yep.
I prefer instead to say I'm getting better at names. I'm getting better at names. I'm getting better at names. Right. I have had to say to somebody, like, they'll tell me their name, and then I go, "Oh goodness, okay, hold on." Like we're 10 minutes into a conversation. I'm like, "I'm gonna know your whole life story, and I'm gonna like tell me your name one more time." Because now I have a story to hold on
Mhm.
to it. Because that's the other thing is we ask name first, and
Mhm.
then we don't have the story yet. And I think our brain needs a little more detail. And so, of course, the easy thing is to say, "Oh, Sammy, tell me about that." Sammy, how do you spend your days? You repeat the name a couple of times. That is helpful. But I think there's an intention too.
Mhm.
I noticed that when I'm in high levels of stress, my brain, it's almost like my computer RAM is running in the background. And like when you do the task manager on your computer and it's like, "Oh, yeah, there's no RAM left." And I notice that when I'm in that state, then it's harder for me to grab onto people's names. Um,
It
than it,
is.
yeah,
And
because you
when
just don't have
you
enough space in your brain.
and if that's and if you decide I want to be somebody who is good at remembering names, I bet you're gonna get better at it. If you make
Yes,
that decision and say, "I'm just gonna
a
consciously try to
hundred
get better at
percent.
it," we don't even have to go into all of the different strategies you can Google on how to remember somebody's name. If you decide that's something I wanna do in order to because I know that it is beneficial to help remember things about people, you're gonna get better at it. You just are.
Absolutely.
And I think that even that is in all of this, if you find yourself in a spot where you feel lonely, you don't feel connected with others, you don't feel like you belong, the very first step to change that is to decide, I want to change this.
Yes.
This goes back to literally chapter 1 of Be Freaking Awesome. If you don't make the decision that you want to change it, then that's okay. And if you don't have a decision you want to make, you be like, actually, I'm looking around and I have a lot of good friendships. And if I was to add more right now, that would kind of feel a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
Great. Don't add more friendships.
Yeah.
Decide what you want to do and then go do that on purpose and find the resources you need, find the tools you need. So many people have gone before you. Once you decide what the thing is that you want, go chase it unashamedly and pursue it wholeheartedly. But decide I don't wanna be lonely anymore. I wanna make a
Mhm.
difference. So,
Love it. That's amazing. What are our final thoughts?
I think my final thoughts is make a list of how you can be a good friend and make a
Mhm.
list of what you would like in a good friend and seek it out and figure out what does it take for you to show up for others and how are the ways that you want people to show up for you because I think when you write it down, one, you'll clarify for yourself, what am I actually looking for? You'll
Mhm.
realize, you might be being unrealistic in some of your expectations. I want somebody to be able to read my brain and know when my moods are up and down and be able to respond to those without me ever having to say a word. Well, okay, uh, that's a stretch. But what are the things that you are actually looking for? And then go seek it out. Figure out what are the steps it takes to get there and go forth. Angela, what about you? Any other thoughts or final advice
Yeah,
on
I do. I
friends?
have a couple of thoughts. I have the idea that I have friends that like they get busy, they're in a busy season. And so the idea that I have too many friends, it would be overwhelming. Um, I'm like, oh, be careful because all of a sudden, if all of them got busy or two of them moved in a few weeks' time, then you're not
Mhm,
cultivating. Also, I have some new friends in the last 2 years, 2 or 3 years that like, oh my goodness, they have been such a joy to get to know them. And I will tell you, this is the other kind of takeaway is that forming new friendships is not always convenient.
mhm.
Sometimes, like, you're scheduled to go out to dinner or to coffee, and you're like, "Gosh, I just wanna snuggle up in my bed," and just know that there is some benefit, and you may have to there may be a cost to you, whether that is, if somebody gets busy or something, so that way you're not it's not it's this courage thing. You wouldn't need courage if it was easy,
Yeah.
right? Like we don't need courage to do easy things. We need courage to do hard things. And so I just say hang in there, stick
Mhm,
with it. And go review the episode where we talk about some of the other things. Not recently, I guess it's been several years ago, but like our bookstore it's a book club and it has a writer's night. And so I joined the writer's night and I only see the folks once a month, but golly, I'm starting to really love just I don't see them outside of that time. And yet their relationships have just fed my
mhm.
soul. So
And, to bring back a tip that you have chatted about before on the feeling, quote, "too busy," put a put a calendar reminder on the 1st of the month, every month to say, "These are my monthly check-in friends." If I've not talked to them recently, like, "Ooh, yep, good reminder." Got busy and suddenly, hours turned into months that I was like, "Oh, I'll do that later tonight," and then it's been like 4 months since I did
yeah,
that task.
yeah.
Put something in on your calendar. I once had somebody who was like, "Oh, I can't believe that you would have to, like, schedule me in." And I was like, if I don't use all of the tools to my disposal to make sure that I remember to do this thing, it's unlikely. Like, I'm gonna use the tools that I got available to me. So yeah, I'm gonna put it on my schedule. And that means that to me is so much more precious that you got a block on my calendar, like in my time, the most limited resource we have. You got time there. That's really, really special. So I'd love to hear from you guys. What are your tips and how are you guys building friendships? Where are the areas that you're struggling in? If you would like, you can send us a voice memo or you can send us a text. Find a way to communicate with us and let us know what are you doing to build friendships? Where are the areas you're struggling with? And maybe we'll revisit this soon and help share some of those things out so that you all can continue to learn from each other. Love to share things from the fam to everybody else. Thanks everyone for listening today and for joining in on the conversation. Next week, we're going to be unpacking some of the things that I've been learning from the Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins, which is fascinating that I have gotten like 6 different inputs that have about the same core message: radical acceptance, stoicism, let them theory, all of these things. We're going to be unpacking that and what does that look like and what does it mean. So feel free to read the book between now and next week if y'all want, or don't. And that's fine too.
I can't wait because I was just in Greece, and so I want to talk about Stoicism because that is where it was born. So
Well, isn't
love
that
it.
where like a lot of things were born? Anyway.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Marcus Aurelius is actually Roman, so somebody could argue that he like made it more popular. Plato started it, whatever. Anyway, yeah, a lot of things were born there.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of the fam. We are so grateful to have each and every one of you. And until next time, we hope you guys go be freaking awesome.